You ever notice that no one really tells you what to do after? After the lights go down, after the applause fades, after the role that consumed you lets you go, or worse, refuses to leave. I'm sitting in that space right now. This podcast, you're hearing it in the exact moment before I know if anyone will clap for it. This is the part nobody talks about. The silence after the final bow, the in-between space where there's no script, no validation, and no next scene waiting in the wings. So if you're sitting in that space too, wondering who you are without the noise and the lights, I'm right here with you. Welcome to After the Applause. Now, I've taken on more roles than I can count. On stage, behind the DJ booth, as a bodybuilder, and now as an associate marriage family therapist on the road to licensure, holding people through their own returns. Some of those roles I chose with pride. Others I fell into. And I couldn't quite figure out how to let them go. Because sometimes we're not just grieving the loss of a role, we're overwhelmed by the new ones we're creating. We become these expanded versions of ourselves, bigger, louder, and more seen, and then wonder, how do I hold all these parts of me without drowning in them? Because expansion feels good, but it's heavy too. What new version of you is waiting to take the stage? How do you keep that role from becoming the whole story? And when the role ends, what's left? Nobody teaches you how to live in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. When the stage isn't available, when the room is quiet, when you're no longer being seen or heard the way you once were. And that's terrifying, isn't it? Because when we're not being witnessed, and when there's no one to say, hey, you did great, we start asking, do I even exist without it? Well, what if this isn't the ending? What if this is the rehearsal space? What if this moment is the breath where we decide which parts of us are ready for the spotlight and which parts deserve to rest? When's the last time you really paused in that in-between space without rushing to become the next version of you? Well, let me tell you why I wanted to name this podcast After the Applause, and what I mean by it when I say that. Because this isn't just about theater. This is about that moment anyone, creative or not, finishes something to whatever size, pours their heart into whatever, and then sits in the silence wondering, now what? It's about what happens when the praise goes quiet, when the room empties, when no one's watching. And here's the thing, applause isn't always about ego. It's about belonging. It's about connection. It's about knowing what I gave mattered. Our nervous systems are wired for tribe, for being seen. And when we're not, when we're in that gap, it can feel like exile. So what happens after we've sat in the silence? This is where the real practice begins. The work of coming back to ourselves. Because as performers, creatives, emotional athletes, healers, we are constantly stretching, transforming, embodying. But growth without grounding, that's how we disappear into roles we never meant to keep. So this podcast is the practice of choosing what stays and what goes, what we keep, what we shed, who we've become, and who we're ready to return to. So how do I care for the parts of me that are still becoming before anyone even sees them? How do I rehearse my next role with joy, not exhaustion? How do I stay whole even as I grow? If you're a performer, a musician, a therapist, a cultural healer, a creative, if you have had to smile through grief, perform while exhausted, or hold space for others while forgetting to hold space for yourself, this space is for you. If you ever shapeshifted to survive, if you ever played a part in your own family, your job, your relationships, and now you're trying to figure out how to come back to yourself, this podcast is for you. We're going to talk about embodiment and recovery, but I also talk about dating while being a creative, family dynamics while holding multiple identities, the reality of being a feeler in a numbed out world, what joy looks like when it's hard to access, what grief feels like when the show must go on, what happens to our nervous systems when we stay in character too long. And yes, even how art and activism collide in our own bodies, sometimes beautifully, sometimes painfully. Not that I want to talk about politics, but you get my point. So you'll hear from guests, actors, musicians, therapists, cultural workers, anyone really who is navigating their own returns. And there will be moments that feel heavy, but also ridiculous, joyful, raw, human. Because this podcast isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, being bold, being courageous, being vulnerable. And this isn't just a personal reflection. This is an urgent call to pay attention. Because for too long we've been surviving. Now it's time to learn how to thrive. We are the emotional athletes of this world. And just like physical athletes get coaching resources, recovery plans, we need the same for our emotional labor. Every time we perform on stage, in a session, in a conversation, in community, we're becoming something. And neuroscience tells us your body doesn't always know the difference between who you played and who you are. So we wonder why we're tired, why the grief lingers, why we crave applause just to remember we exist. This isn't just burnout, it's embodiment without recovery. And we can't afford that anymore. So here I am in the silence, in the exact space I've been talking about, between the fear of what if no one claps for this, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this is exactly what someone needed to hear. Yeah, that's why this podcast isn't just something I created. It is the practice. This moment, this recording, is my return to myself, sitting in the unknown and showing up anyway. Because the fear isn't just about starting, it's about doing something that may never bring applause and doing it anyway. It's the vulnerable space between deeply caring and deeply letting go. So, if you're standing at your own edge, wondering if it's worth it without the guarantee of being seen, stay. Stay with me in this silence. I invite you to take a breath. And that's where I'll meet you. Right here. After the applause. If this moves something in you, Don't rush past it. Sit with it. And when you're ready, share this with someone who's sitting in their own in-between. Remind them they are enough. And they don't have to have it all figured out.